Most women would scream if they walked into a VIP suite and found their fated mate, the Alpha King, standing shirtless while a rival female adjusted the strap of her silk dress. Most women would burst into tears, run down the hallway, and create a scene that would feed the gossip columns for a decade. But I am not most women. I am Sophie, the lead negotiator for the Eastern Alliance, and I don't do tears. I do damage control. So instead of running, I stepped inside, slammed the heavy mahogany door shut, and engaged the deadbolt with a loud, definitive click. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. I wasn't locked in here with them. They were locked in here with me. Welcome back to Raven's Library, your sanctuary for romance and high-stakes drama. Before we lock the doors and start today's story, I want to know who is here with us. Scroll down to the comments right now and let me know where you're listening from. I love seeing how far our stories travel around the globe. And if you hate cliffhangers and want to binge the entire series right now, hit that join button. Members get exclusive access to early uploads and full batch releases before anyone else. Now, take a deep breath. Let's get into the story. Chapter 1. The Walk-In. The air in the penthouse suite smelled like expensive scotch, ozone, and the cloying, floral perfume of a woman trying too hard. Cain, the Alpha King, and the man the fates had annoyingly decided was my soulmate, was leaning against the marble wet bar. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned, hanging open to reveal the kind of abs that usually required a subscription to see. He looked bored. Lazily, dangerously bored. Standing 3 feet away from him was Sienna. Of course it was Sienna. The daughter of the Southern Alpha had been trying to claw her way into Cain's bed since preschool. She looked flushed, her lipstick slightly smudged, and she was currently pretending to be shocked by my entrance. "Sophie," Sienna purred, smoothing her dress with a manicured hand. "This is a private meeting. You really should learn to knock. It's basic etiquette." I didn't even look at her. My eyes were fixed on Cain. He hadn't moved. He hadn't flinched. He was just swirling the amber liquid in his glass, watching me over the rim with those predatory, golden-flecked eyes. He looked like a cat who had just knocked a vase off a shelf and was waiting to see if I'd sweep it up. "Get out, Sienna," I said. My voice was calm. Terrifyingly calm. It was the voice I used when a foreign pack tried to tax our timber exports. "Excuse me?" she scoffed, stepping closer to Cain as if his proximity gave her rank. "I don't think you have the authority to—" "I said get out," I interrupted, finally shifting my gaze to her. I didn't yell. I didn't have to. "Unless you want me to call your father and explain exactly why the Eastern Alliance is about to pull our funding for his border patrols? I'm sure he'd love to know his daughter cost him 3 million credits because she couldn't keep her hands to herself." Sienna paled. She looked at Cain for backup. Cain didn't even blink. He took a slow sip of his drink, his silence a deafening endorsement of my threat. With a huff of indignation that convinced absolutely no one, Sienna grabbed her clutch and stormed past me. I waited until the door clicked shut behind her before I allowed myself to breathe. Now it was just us, the negotiator and the king. "You look nice, Sophie," Cain said, his voice a deep, gravelly rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. "That dress fits you." "Don't," I snapped, walking further into the room.
My heels sank into the plush carpet. Do not try to charm your way out of this. We have an agreement, Cain. A treaty. We agreed to be professional until the mating ceremony next month. We agreed to build a foundation of mutual respect.
You agreed to that,
he corrected, setting his glass down on the marble counter.
I just nodded while you talked. I felt the heat rising in my cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from pure, unadulterated rage. I walk in here and find you half naked with a woman who has been trying to undermine me for years. Do you have any idea how that looks? Do you have any idea the PR nightmare I'd have to spin if the press got a photo of this? Is that what you're worried about? Cain pushed off the counter, taking a slow step toward me. The press? The optics? The polling numbers? I am worried about integrity. I threw my hands up. I am worried about the fact that my fated mate is apparently incapable of keeping his pants buttoned for 5 minutes. Why would you do this? Why would you disrespect me like this? He stopped just out of arm's reach. The air between us crackled, heavy and electric. He was too big, too close, and smell of him, rain and cedar, was making my wolf whine in my head, begging me to submit. But I stood my ground, chin raised, glaring daggers at his arrogant face. Answer me, Cain, I demanded, my voice trembling slightly for the first time. Why did you cheat? A slow, devastating smirk curled the corner of his mouth. It wasn't an apology. It was a trap. I didn't cheat, Sophie, he said softly, his voice dropping to a seductive whisper that sent a shiver straight down my spine. Because you haven't claimed me yet. Chapter 2. The Technicality. The silence that followed his declaration was heavy enough to crush a lesser woman. I stared at him, my brain trying to process the sheer, unadulterated audacity of what he had just said. Technicality? I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. You're standing there, half naked, smelling like cheap perfume and expensive mistakes, and your defense is a legal technicality? Cain didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He picked up his glass again, the ice clinking softly against the crystal. It's not a technicality, Sophie. It's wolf law. Section 4, Paragraph 2 of the Mating Bonds Act. Until the female formally claims the male, publicly and physically, the bond is considered dormant. He took a sip, his eyes dancing with dark amusement. I am, for all intents and purposes, a single man, a free agent. My jaw actually dropped. I snapped it shut immediately, grinding my teeth. We are fated mates, Cain. The moon goddess literally wrote our names in the stars, and you're quoting subsection 4 at me like a divorce lawyer? I'm quoting it because you treat our bond like a merger acquisition, he countered smoothly. He set the glass down and leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of the marble bar. The muscles in his forearms flexed, distracting me for a nanosecond before I refocused my rage. You schedule our dates through your assistant. You vet my public appearances. You treat me like a portfolio asset, not a mate. So, I figured if we're playing by corporate rules, I'd leverage my assets. You are unbelievable, I hissed, clutching my purse so hard the leather creaked. You staged this. You brought Sienna in here, knowing I was coming up to discuss the border treaty, just to, what, make me jealous? Did it work? He asked simply. It made me want to strangle you, I shot back. There is a difference between passion and homicide, Your Majesty. Is there? He tilted his head. I smell your pheromones, Sophie. You're not just angry. You're territorial. You wanted to rip Sienna's throat out. Admit it. I wanted to file a grievance. I lied. And now, I'm going to leave. I'm going to go back to my room, pack my bags, and fly back to the Eastern capital. You can explain to the council why the negotiations failed. I spun on my heel, marching toward the heavy oak door. I reached for the handle, ready to storm out and make a dramatic exit that would leave him brooding in his penthouse. My hand was inches from the brass latch when a deafening siren ripped through the air. Whoop! Whoop! Red strobe lights flashed from the ceiling sensors. Before I could even react, heavy steel shutters slammed down over the panoramic windows with a crash that shook the floor. A mechanical grinding noise echoed from the door in front of me, followed by the terrifying thud of heavy-duty magnetic locks engaging. "Attention!" a robotic female voice announced from the hidden speakers. "Code Red weather alert. Blizzard conditions have exceeded safety parameters. Lockdown initiated. All exits are sealed. ETA for clearance, indefinite." I stood there, hand frozen in mid-air, staring at the now immovable door. "Well?" Cain's voice came from behind me, dripping with smug satisfaction. "That's unfortunate." I slowly turned around. He was smirking, a full, arrogant, victorious smirk. "Looks like you're stuck with me, negotiator." Chapter 3. The Cage. "Open it," I commanded, staring at the steel plate that had just sealed us inside. "I can't," Cain said, though he didn't sound particularly distressed about it. He moved toward the massive fireplace, picking up a remote to ignite the gas logs. "The automated system overrides manual controls during a code red. It's for our safety. The winds out there are clocking 100 miles an hour." "I have level 5 clearance," I argued, pulling out my phone. "I can override the—" I stopped. The screen stared back at me, displaying the one thing a woman in my position fears more than death: no service. "Satellite scramblers engage during lockdown, too," Cain added helpfully. "Prevents interference with the emergency beacons." I looked around the penthouse. It was massive. 3,000 square feet of luxury, leather, and chrome. But suddenly, it felt like a shoebox. A shoebox I shared with a 6'4" alpha who was currently watching me with the expression of a wolf who had just trapped a very stubborn rabbit. "You knew," I accused, pointing a manicured finger at him. "You knew this storm was coming." "I watched the Weather Channel, Sophie. It's hardly insider trading." "You lured me here right before the lockdown." "I invited you for a drink," he corrected. "You're the one who stormed in early." I paced the length of the living room, my heels clicking sharply on the hard wood. "I am not staying here. I have meetings. I have a Zoom call with the European pack at dawn. I have a life that does not involve watching you walk around half naked." "You can use the guest suite." He gestured vaguely toward a hallway on the east wing. "It's soundproof. You won't even know I'm here." I narrowed my eyes at him. "Fine." I marched down the hallway, intending to lock myself in the guest room and sulk until the sensors cleared us. I threw open the door to the guest suite and froze. It wasn't just a guest room. Laid out on the bed was my favorite silk pajama set, the navy blue one I only wore at home. Next to it was my specific brand of face cream, a stack of paperback thrillers I'd been meaning to read, and a bottle of the obscure Pinot Noir I drank when I was stressed. My luggage wasn't here. These things hadn't been packed. They had been stocked. I felt a cold chill, that had nothing to do with the blizzard outside. I turned around slowly. Cain was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed over his bare chest. He wasn't smiling anymore. "You had this prepared," I whispered. "This wasn't an accident. The storm, the lockdown, the timing. You planned all of it." He didn't deny it. He didn't even blink. "I told you, Sophie," he said, his voice dropping an octave, vibrating through the floorboards and straight into my chest. "I was tired of waiting for an appointment. I told you I'd get your attention eventually. Now, I have it." Chapter 4. The Ultimatum. "You kidnapped me," I stated flatly. "I prefer the term aggressive hospitality," Cain replied, pushing off the doorframe and walking into the room. He moved with that predatory grace that always set my teeth on edge. Too smooth, too quiet for a man of his size.
"This is a felony, Cain, even for a king." "Arrest me," he challenged softly. "Oh wait, you can't. The phones are down." I took a step back, my back hitting the edge of the dresser. "What do you want? You want me to sign the treaty? Fine, I'll sign it. Just override the system." "I don't care about the treaty." He stopped in the center of the room, occupying the space so completely that the air felt thinner. "I don't care about the borders, or the trade routes, or the council. I care about the fact that my mate looks at me like I'm a line item on a budget spreadsheet." "I am a professional," I defended, crossing my arms to create a barrier between us. "I treat you with respect." "You treat me with distance," he corrected, "and I'm done with it. We are stuck in this penthouse for at least 3 days, Sophie. No assistants, no schedules, no places to run." "So what? You think because the doors are locked, I'm just going to fall into your arms?" I let out a harsh, incredulous laugh. "You think forced proximity is going to make me submit? I'm a negotiator, Cain. I don't break under pressure. I thrive on it." "Good." His eyes flashed gold. "Because I'm not going to force you to do anything. In fact, I'm going to make you a promise." He took one more step, invading my personal space until I had to crane my neck to look him in the eye. "I won't touch you," he said. The vow hung in the air, heavy and absolute. "I won't kiss you. I won't hold you. I won't even brush against you in the hallway. I won't initiate a single thing." I blinked, thrown off balance. "What?" "That's the deal," he murmured. "I'm going to stay on my side of the line. If you want to be cold, we'll be cold. But—" He leaned down, his lips inches from my ear. I could feel the heat radiating off him, searing my skin without making contact. "If you want me, Sophie, if you want this bond, if you want my hands on you, you are going to have to ask for it. "You are going to have to beg." My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. The arrogance, the absolute hubris of this man. He thought he could just exist in the same room and I'd crumble? I looked up at him, summoning every ounce of icy reserve I had honed over a decade of politics. I gave him my coldest, most professional smile. "You're on," I said. "But don't hold your breath, Your Majesty. Hell will freeze over long before I beg you for anything." Cain smiled, and it was the smile of a wolf who had just spotted a weakness. "Look outside, baby," he whispered, gesturing to the window where the snow was burying the world in white. "It's already freezing." Chapter 5. Cold War. 24 hours. We had been trapped for 24 hours, and I was already considering chewing through the drywall just to escape. The Cold War had begun, and Cain was fighting dirty. I was sitting at the dining table, surrounded by legal pads and a dead laptop, pretending to draft a memo. I was wearing a sensible blouse and trousers, hair pulled back in a severe bun, radiating professionalism. Cain, on the other hand, had apparently decided that shirts were optional during a blizzard. He was in the living area, directly in my line of sight, doing handstand push-ups. Handstand push-ups. Is that strictly necessary? I asked, not looking up from my paper. My pen was digging so hard into the page I was about to tear through it. Gotta keep the blood flowing, Sophie. He grunted, lowering himself until his nose touched the carpet, then pushing back up with annoying ease. The gym is downstairs and the elevator is locked. Improvise, adapt, overcome. I risked a glance. Big mistake. His back muscles rippled and shifted under his skin like coiled snakes. Sweat glistened on his shoulders, catching the light from the fireplace. He was a masterpiece of masculine geometry, and I hated him for it. You're breathing loudly, I complained.
It's distracting. Put in earplugs. I went back to my memo. Subject: Resource allocation for Northern Territories. I wrote the word allocation 3 times before I realized I was just scribbling nonsense. He dropped down from the handstand and rolled to his feet in one fluid motion. He grabbed a towel and wiped his face. Then, because he was a demon sent to torment me, he used the hem of the towel to wipe down his chest, moving slowly, dragging the fabric over his abs. I stared. I couldn't help it. My wolf, the traitorous bitch, let out a low purr in the back of my mind. Mate strong, mate pretty. Shut up, I told her. Mate is a manipulative ass. Cain tossed the towel onto a chair and walked toward the kitchen, passing right behind me. He didn't touch me. He kept his promise. But the air displacement as he passed washed over me, a wave of body heat and the scent of sandalwood and pure, raw alpha. I stiffened, refusing to turn around. He stopped at the fridge, opening a bottle of water. I could see his reflection in the darkened glass of the window in front of me. He wasn't drinking. He was holding the bottle, staring at the back of my neck. His eyes were no longer human. They were molten gold, dilated and hungry, tracking the pulse I knew was fluttering visibly beneath my skin. He wasn't indifferent. He was starving. I watched his reflection watch me, and for the first time since the lockdown started, I realized that his rules weren't protecting me. They were just delaying the inevitable. Chapter 6: The Scent of Rivalry. I needed a distraction. The sexual tension in the room was thick enough to choke on, so I decided to clean. Or rather, I decided to aggressively reorganize the living room while Cain took a shower. I was fluffing the pillows on the oversized leather sofa when something caught my eye. Wedged between the cushion and the armrest was a scrap of fabric. I pulled it out. It was a silk scarf. Red. Expensive. And it smelled like gardenias. Sienna. The scent hit me like a physical slap. It was the same cloying perfume she had been wearing yesterday when I walked in. It was here, on his couch, where he relaxed, where he slept. Reason fled. Logic, my oldest friend, packed its bags and jumped out the window. A red haze dropped over my vision. I didn't care that he said he hadn't touched her. I didn't care about technicalities. The evidence of another female in my mate's territory triggered a primal, ugly instinct deep in my gut. My hands started to shake. A low growl, one I didn't authorize, rumbled in my chest. Sophie? Cain's voice came from the hallway. He had just emerged from the shower, a towel low on his hips, water dripping from his dark hair. He stopped dead when he saw me. He didn't look at my face. He looked at the air around me. He flared his nostrils, inhaling sharply. "What is that?" he asked, his voice dropping into a warning growl. "Your scent, it's changed." "This," I spat, holding up the red scarf like it was a severed head. "Is this why you needed the guest room? So you could keep your rotation comfortable?" "That's not mine," he said, stepping closer. "Sienna left it when she stormed out. I didn't even know it was there." "Don't lie to me," I shouted, the control I prided myself on shattering like glass. "It smells like her. It smells like she was all over you." I was vibrating with rage, my wolf clawing at the surface, demanding I tear something apart. Cain didn't back down. He didn't apologize. Instead, his eyes darkened, the gold swallowing the iris completely. He crossed the room in 2 long strides. I backed up, hitting the wall hard. He slammed his hands against the plaster on either side of my head, trapping me. He didn't touch me. His chest was inches from mine, his damp skin radiating heat, but he maintained the gap. It was maddening. He leaned down, burying his face in the crook of my neck, inhaling deeply, aggressively. "Jealousy," he murmured against my skin, the vibration sending shockwaves through my nervous system. "That's what that smell is. Bitter, sharp, possessive." He pulled back just enough to look me in the eye, a terrifying satisfaction on his face. "You smell like murder, Sophie," he whispered. "Does my freedom bother you? Or are you just realizing that you don't want anyone else to have me?" Kitchen diplomacy. Cain didn't kiss me. He didn't bite me. He just held that stare for 3 excruciating seconds, letting the accusation hang in the air like smoke, and then he pushed off the wall. "I'm hungry," he announced, his voice abruptly shifting from dark lover to casual roommate. The emotional whiplash nearly gave me vertigo. "The automated dumbwaiter is frozen shut. We're cooking." I blinked, my pulse still thumping a frantic rhythm against my throat. "We? Unless you want to eat protein bars for the next 48 hours. Come on, negotiator. Let's see if your domestic skills are as sharp as your tongue." 10 minutes later, the surreal nature of my life had reached a new peak. I was standing in a gourmet kitchen that cost more than my parents' house, chopping bell peppers next to the Alpha King of the continent, who was currently sautéing onions with a terrifying level of competence. The kitchen was too small. Not physically, it was massive, but energetically. Cain took up too much space. Every time he reached for the salt or turned to check the pan, the air pressure in the room seemed to shift. "You're dicing those peppers like they personally offended you," Cain noted, leaning against the counter as the onions sizzled. "I'm imagining they are your ego," I muttered, scraping the red chunks into a bowl. "It's therapeutic." "You know," he mused, grabbing a bottle of olive oil, "if you put this much passion into the treaty negotiations, we would have had peace in the East 5 years ago." "I am professional," I argued, pointing the knife at him. "I rely on logic. You rely on intimidation and whatever this is." I gestured to his shirtless torso. He had at least put on sweatpants, but the lack of a shirt was a strategic weapon, and we both knew it. "It's called charm, Sophie. You should try it sometime." He moved to the cutting board next to me to slice a peach for the salad. He was too close. His arm brushed the air near my shoulder, the heat radiating off him like a furnace. I tried to focus on the peppers. Chop, chop, chop. "You're trembling," he observed quietly. "I am not." "You are. Your adrenaline is spiked." He stopped slicing and turned to me. The knife in his hand was still, but his eyes were active, searching my face. "You're still thinking about the scarf." "I'm thinking about the logistics of poisoning your food," I lied. Cain chuckled, a low, dark sound. He speared a slice of fresh peach with the tip of his knife. "Taste this." I froze. "I have hands,"
I can feed myself. Humor me." He held the knife up, the golden fruit balancing precariously on the tip. It was a dare. If I refused, it showed I was affected. If I accepted, I was playing his game. I decided to call his bluff. I leaned forward, maintaining eye contact, and opened my mouth. I bit the fruit off the blade, my lips brushing the cold steel, but stopping millimeters from his fingers. The juice was sweet, shocking against the tension in the room. I chewed slowly, never looking away. Cain's eyes darkened. The playful roommate facade cracked, revealing the predator underneath. He watched my mouth move, his gaze dropping to my lips, then to my throat as I swallowed. "Good?" he asked, his voice rougher than before. "It's a peach, Cain," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Don't overanalyze it." He smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. His gaze was intense, focused, and starving. "I analyze everything, Sophie, and right now, I'm analyzing how long it's going to take before you stop looking at me like an enemy and start looking at me like a meal." Chapter 8. Steam. The next morning, I woke up ready to kill someone. Specifically, a plumber. Or a king who knew how to sabotage plumbing. I turned the handle in the guest shower, expecting a blast of hot water to wake me up. Instead, the pipes groaned, shuddered, and spat out a pathetic trickle of ice-cold sludge. "You have got to be kidding me," I hissed, wrapping my towel around myself and marching out into the hallway. Cain was sitting on the sofa, reading a hardcover book, looking infuriatingly fresh and clean. His hair was damp. He smelled like soap and satisfaction. "The water heater in the east wing seems to be malfunctioning," he said without looking up from his page. "Old pipes. Terrible tragedy." "This building was built last year," I snapped. "The pipes aren't old. They're sabotaged." "Nature is unpredictable," he shrugged. "Feel free to use the master bath. It's working perfectly." I glared at the back of his head. "I hate you." "I know. Towels are under the sink." I stormed into the master suite, slamming the door behind me. The bathroom was obscene. Floor-to-ceiling marble, a rainfall showerhead big enough to water a lawn, and glass walls. Glass walls. The shower wasn't a stall. It was a glass cube in the center of the room. It frosted over when the steam hit it, theoretically providing privacy, but it was still exposed. I didn't have a choice. I stripped off my robe and stepped inside, cranking the heat up high. The water hit me, hot and soothing, and for a moment I relaxed. The steam began to rise, fogging up the clear glass, turning the rest of the room into a gray blur. I washed my hair quickly, eager to get back to the safety of my clothes. I was rinsing the conditioner out when I felt it. The sensation of being watched. I wiped the water from my eyes and looked through the fogged glass. A shadow was standing there. Cain. He was standing right outside the shower door. He wasn't moving. He was just a dark, looming silhouette against the white mist. My heart slammed into my ribs. He had promised not to touch me. He had promised to stay on his side of the line. But here he was, inches away, separated only by a pane of wet glass. "Cain?" I called out, my voice echoing in the enclosed space. I felt naked, more than naked. I felt hunted. He didn't answer. I wrapped my arms around myself, covering my chest, though the steam obscured the details. "What are you doing?" The shadow moved. He raised a hand. I flinched, expecting the door to open, expecting him to stride in and end this torment. Instead, his palm pressed flat against the glass. His hand was large, the heat of it radiating through the barrier. He spread his fingers wide.
My breath hitched. Without thinking, drawn by a magnetic pull I couldn't fight, I reached out. I placed my hand against the glass, aligning it with his. My palm against his palm, separated by the fog and the rules. For a moment, we just stood there, hand to hand, breathing in sync. The connection was electric, terrifyingly intimate. Then the shadow pulled away.
Just checking the temperature.
His voice came, muffled and low from the other side.
Don't use all the hot water, Sophie.
Then he walked away, leaving me trembling, wet, and aching for something I refused to name. Chapter 9. The Provocation. If Cain wanted to play games with shadows and steam, fine. Two could play. And I was the lead negotiator for the Eastern Alliance. I didn't play for a draw. I played to win. By dinner time, I had formulated a new strategy. The offensive. I ditched the sensible button-down and trousers. I dug into the emergency wardrobe Cain had stocked and found a silk kimono robe. It was emerald green, short, and tied loosely at the waist. It covered everything required by law, but it suggested everything else. I walked into the kitchen where Cain was setting the table. I wasn't wearing shoes. I hopped up onto the granite island counter,
crossing my legs so the robe slipped just enough to show a stretch of thigh. "What's for dinner?" I asked, my voice bright and cheery. Cain froze. He was holding 2 wine glasses. He looked at me, started at my bare feet, traveled up the curve of my calves, lingered on the V-neck of the robe, and finally met my eyes. His jaw tightened so hard I saw a muscle jump in his cheek. "Risotto," he said, his voice strained. "Lovely." I reached for the open bottle of wine on the counter, pouring myself a glass. I took a sip, letting my head fall back slightly, exposing the long line of my neck. I was thinking, after we sign this treaty, I might take a vacation, maybe go to the coast. I hear the Southern Alphas are very hospitable. Cain set the glasses down, hard. "You're not going south." "Why not?" I swirled the wine, looking at him through my lashes. "I'm a free agent, remember? You said so yourself. Technically unclaimed. Maybe I want to shop around." I was pushing him. I knew I was. I wanted him to break. I wanted him to shatter that arrogant calm and admit that this no-touching rule was torture for him, too. "You're playing a dangerous game, Sophie," he warned. He gripped the stem of his own wine glass, his knuckles turning white. "I'm just making conversation." I leaned forward, the robe gaping slightly. "Unless, does it bother you? Does it bother you to think of another alpha touching me, claiming me?" I saw the snap happen in slow motion, his hand clenched, the crystal stem of the wine glass shattered with a sharp crack. Red wine exploded outward, splashing onto the white tablecloth like a crime scene. Shards of glass fell to the floor. But Cain didn't flinch. He didn't even look at his hand, which was now dripping with a mix of Cabernet and bright red blood. He just stared at me. His eyes were completely gold. No whites, just pure animal fury. "Oops," I whispered, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm of fear and thrill. "You think this is funny?" he asked, his voice deadly quiet. He held up his bleeding hand, ignoring the cut. "You think provoking a wolf in a cage is a smart diplomatic strategy?" "I think," I said, my breath hitching, "that you're not as indifferent as you pretend to be." "Indifferent?" he laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "Sophie, the only reason you are still walking is because I have a control of iron. but iron melts, and you are holding a blowtorch. Chapter 10. Truth by Firelight. The standoff was interrupted by the universe deciding we hadn't suffered enough. With a loud bang, the overhead lights flickered and died. The hum of the refrigerator cut out. The electric fire in the hearth vanished. The penthouse plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness. "Generator failure," Cain announced from the dark. "The vents must be clogged with snow." "Great," I sighed, the adrenaline from our confrontation draining away, leaving me tired. "Just great." 10 minutes later, Cain had managed to get a real fire going in the emergency wood stove. We sat on the thick fur rug in front of the hearth, the only source of light in the cavernous room. The orange glow danced over our faces, casting long, flickering shadows. We drank the wine directly from the bottle. Cain had wrapped a bandage around his hand, and for the first time in 3 days, the silence wasn't aggressive. It was heavy, somber. "Does it hurt?" I asked, looking at his bandaged hand. "Heals fast," he muttered. "Perks of the job." He took a long pull from the bottle and passed it to me. Our fingers brushed. I didn't pull away. "Why do you do it?" I asked suddenly. The whole Alpha King act, the arrogance, the manipulation. Why couldn't you just ask me on a date like a normal person? Cain stared into the fire. The flames reflected in his eyes, making them look like burning coins. He looked tired. Not physically, but deeply, spiritually exhausted. Because normal people don't date kings, Sophie. They date the title. They date the power. He rested his elbows on his knees. Everyone I meet wants something. A favor, a pardon, a contract. Even you. You walked into this room 3 days ago wanting a signature on a treaty. I opened my mouth to argue, but closed it. He was right. I didn't want a business partner, he continued, his voice low. I have a counsel for that. I wanted someone who would look at me and not see the crown. Someone who would fight me. Someone who would lock the door and demand answers instead of crying. He turned to look at me. The arrogance was gone. In its place was a raw, naked honesty that terrified me more than his anger ever could. I'm lonely, Sophie, he admitted, the words barely a whisper. I have armies, I have wealth, and I have a kingdom. And I have never been more alone in my life. Waiting for you. Watching you act like I was just another meeting on your calendar. It was killing me. I felt a crack in the ice fortress I had built around my heart. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the lines of fatigue around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the bandage on his hand caused by my provocation. He wasn't a villain. He was just a man who had waited a lifetime for a connection I was too scared to give him. I'm not easy to love, Cain, I whispered. I'm stubborn. I'm a workaholic. I don't know how to be soft. I don't want soft, he said intensely. I want you. Chapter 11. The Nightmare. We fell asleep on the rug. It wasn't planned. The wine, the heat from the fire, and the emotional exhaustion just took over. But sleep for me was never a sanctuary. It was a screening room for my worst memories. I was back in the negotiating room 5 years ago, the Western Pack.
They were laughing at me, telling me a female had no place in the war room. I was shouting, trying to be heard, but no sound came out. Then the room dissolved. I was running through the snow, alone, always alone. I called out for a mate, for anyone, but the silence was absolute. The cold was eating me alive. "No," I whimpered, thrashing against the cold. "Don't leave." "Sophie, shh, I'm here." I woke with a gasp, my heart hammering against my ribs like a jackhammer. I wasn't in the snow. I was warm. I was wrapped in strong arms, pressed against a solid, beating chest. Cain was holding me. We were tangled together on the rug, his legs interlocked with mine, his hand rubbing soothing circles on my back. "You're okay," he murmured into my hair. "Just a dream. You're safe." I clung to him, my fingers dug into his shirt. The scent of him, cedar and rain and safety, filled my lungs, chasing away the phantom cold of the nightmare. For a moment, the game didn't exist. The rules didn't exist. It was just the two of us in the firelight. "I hate the cold," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I know," he said softly. "I've got you." I looked up. His face was inches from mine. His eyes were dark, filled with a tenderness that made my chest ache. The desire to bridge the gap, to close the distance and erase the loneliness for both of us was overwhelming. I leaned in. I couldn't help it. I needed to feel him. My lips parted, hovering just a breath away from his. Cain went still. His breath hitched. I could feel the battle waging inside him, the instinct to take what was being offered versus the promise he had made. Then, gently, agonizingly, he pulled back. He put a hand on my cheek, his thumb brushing my skin, but he kept his mouth away from mine. "No," he whispered, his voice rough with regret. "Not like this, Sophie." I blinked, hurt flashing through me. "You don't want me?" "I want you more than I want my next breath," he swore, "but not because you're scared, not because you had a nightmare and you need a blanket. When we kiss, when I finally taste you, it's going to be because you want me, not just safety." He pulled my head down to his chest, tucking me under his chin. "Go back to sleep, negotiator."
I'm not going anywhere. Chapter 12. The Fever. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I had been hit by a truck. My head was pounding. My skin felt too tight, too sensitive. The sunlight streaming through the windows, the storm had finally broken, felt like needles in my eyes. I sat up and the room spun. "Coffee," I mumbled, trying to stand. My legs wobbled. I made it to the hallway before the first wave of heat hit me. It wasn't a normal fever. It started in my core, a molten, liquid fire that spread through my veins, making my blood sing. Oh no. I knew what this was. I had read about it in biology class, but I had assumed, in my arrogance, that I was immune to such primal biology. The mating heat. It happened when fated mates were in close proximity for too long without completing the bond. The body, recognizing the soulmate, essentially went into biological overdrive, demanding the connection. It was a failsafe, a biological ultimatum. Claim him or burn. I stumbled, bracing myself against the wall. The scent of Cain, which had been pleasant before, was now overwhelming. It was everywhere. It was a drug, and I was going through withdrawal. "Sophie?" Cain's voice called from the kitchen. "Breakfast is ready." I couldn't let him see me like this. I couldn't let him win by default because my biology betrayed me. I was the negotiator. I was in control. I lurched toward the guest room, my vision tunneling. "I'm not hungry," I croaked. "Sophie?"
His footsteps approached. Fast. I threw myself into the guest room and slammed the door, locking it with clumsy fingers. I slid down to the floor, gasping for air. The heat was unbearable. It felt like my skin was melting. I needed ice. I needed him. Sophie, open the door. Cain was on the other side. His voice wasn't playful anymore. It was alarmed. Go away, I yelled, but it came out as a desperate whine. I heard him sniff the air loudly through the crack in the door. Then, silence. A heavy, terrifying silence. Code red, Cain growled, his voice dropping into that deep, inhuman register of the Alpha.
Sophie, you're in heat.
I'm fine, I lied, clutching my stomach as a cramp of pure need doubled me over.
You are burning up. Open the door or I will take it off its hinges.
No, I won't. I won't lose.
Crack. The wood around the lock splintered. Boom. The door flew open, the lock shattering under the force of his kick. Cain stood in the doorway. He took one look at me, curled on the floor, flushed, sweating, and trembling, and his eyes went completely black. The scent of my distress hit him, and I saw his controls snap. Chapter 13. The Breaking Point. Don't touch me, I gasped, scrambling backward on the floor, my heels skidding on the hardwood. It was a lie, of course. My body was screaming for him to touch me. Every nerve ending was firing, demanding the friction of his skin against mine to soothe the fire in my blood. Cain ignored my protest. He didn't look like a king anymore. He looked like a first responder entering a disaster zone. He crossed the room in one stride, scooping me up into his arms as if I weighed nothing more than a throw pillow. You're burning up, he growled, the vibration of his chest against my cheek sending a fresh wave of dizzying heat through me. We need to get your temperature down. Now. Put me down, I slurred, pounding weakly on his shoulder. I don't need your charity. You need a doctor, Sophie, but since we're trapped in a snow globe, you're stuck with me. He carried me out of the guest room and kicked open the door to the master suite. The air in there was cooler, but it wasn't enough. He marched straight to the massive bed, depositing me on the silk sheets, then immediately turned and ripped the duvet off. Too hot, he muttered, tossing the heavy blanket into the corner. He disappeared into the bathroom. I heard the faucet running. Cold water. I writhed on the bed, clutching the sheet.
The mating heat was a cruel biological joke. It wasn't just a fever. It was a hollow, aching emptiness that felt like starvation. I could smell him, sandalwood, musk, and the sharp tang of his own aroused concern, and it was torture. Cain returned with a stack of wet, icy washcloths. This is going to suck, he warned. Before I could object, he pressed a freezing cloth to my forehead and another to the side of my neck. I hissed, arching my back. That's cold! That's the point. His face was grim, set in hard lines. He wasn't looking at my body, though my robe had fallen open. He was focused entirely on my eyes, checking for dilation, for lucidity. He was being a medic. He was being noble. And I hated him for it. Why are you doing this? I panted, tears of frustration pricking my eyes. Why are you nursing me? You know what the cure is. You know what I need. Cain flinched. His hand paused on my neck. He closed his eyes for a second, inhaling sharply, and I saw the cords in his neck strain. I know what you need, Sophie, but I told you, I won't take you like this. You're delirious. You're in pain. This isn't intimacy. It's triage. It's rejection! I shouted, the irrational anger of the fever taking over. I slapped his hand away. You talk about wanting me, about craving me, but now, when I'm literally burning for you, You're playing nursemaid. Is it a power trip, Cain? Do you like seeing me weak? I hate seeing you weak, he snapped, his control slipping. His eyes flashed gold. I hate seeing you in pain. But I am not going to claim my mate while she's out of her mind with fever just to make it stop. I want you to remember it. I want you to choose it. I am choosing it, I cried out, grabbing the lapels of his shirt, trying to pull him down. Just do it! Make it stop! He grabbed my wrists, pinning them to the mattress above my head. Not to hurt me, but to stop me. He leaned over me, his face inches from mine, his breath hot and ragged. I can't, he gritted out through clenched teeth, because if I start now, I won't be able to stop. And I refuse to wake up tomorrow and have you hate me for taking advantage of your biology. I won't hate you, I whispered, desperate. I'll hate you if you stop. You don't know what you're saying. He pulled away, releasing my wrists and stepping back from the bed as if I were radioactive. He ran a hand through his hair, looking wild, looking pushed to his absolute limit. Maybe I do, I taunted, sitting up, the wet cloth falling from my head. I wanted to hurt him. I wanted to break that infuriating, noble resolve. Or maybe you just can't do it. Maybe the great Alpha King is all talk. Maybe you don't actually want me. Cain froze. The air in the room seemed to vanish. When he turned back to me, the human was gone. The wolf was at the surface, primal and terrifying. Do not test my restraint, woman, he snarled, a low rumble that shook the bed frame. It is hanging by a thread. Chapter 14. The Snap. The growl vibrated in my bones. It should have terrified me. A rational person facing down a 6'4" alpha on the edge of a feral snap would have backed down. They would have pulled the sheet up and apologized. But the fever had burned away my rationality, leaving something else in its place. Clarity. I looked at him. I saw the tension in his jaw, the way his hands were clenched into fists at his sides to keep from reaching for me. He wasn't rejecting me. He was protecting me. He was protecting us. He valued my agency more than his own biological imperative to claim me. In 5 years of negotiating treaties with powerful men, no one had ever respected me enough to tell me no for my own good. The realization hit me harder than the fever. He didn't just want my body. He wanted my soul. He wanted the one thing I had never given anyone, my submission. Not a submission of weakness, but a submission of trust. And suddenly, the heat wasn't a burden anymore. It was fuel. I stopped shaking. I took a deep breath, pushing the pain into the background, focusing entirely on the man standing at the foot of the bed. You're right, I said. My voice was no longer a whine. It was steady, hoarse, but steady. Cain blinked, the gold in his eyes swirling uncertainly. What? You're right, I repeated. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stood up. The room swayed, but I locked my knees. I let the silk robe slide off my shoulders, pooling on the floor, leaving me standing in nothing but the moonlight and my pride. I was hiding behind the fever. I was using it as an excuse so I wouldn't have to admit the truth. Sophie, he warned, his gaze dragging over me like a physical caress. Get back in bed. No. I took a step toward him, then another. You set the rules, Cain. You said I had to ask. You said I had to be sure. You are burning up, he argued, though he didn't back away. He couldn't. He was magnetized to me. I am, I admitted, stopping just inches from him. I reached out and placed my hands flat on his chest. I could feel his heart hammering against my palms, a frantic, chaotic rhythm that matched my own. But not because of the bond. I'm burning for you. I looked up into his eyes, stripping away the title of negotiator, stripping away the defenses, the snark,
and the walls I had built to survive in his world. "I'm done fighting," I whispered. "I'm done negotiating terms. I don't want a treaty, Cain. I want this." I grabbed the collar of his shirt, the shirt he had buttoned up to hide his own struggle, and yanked him forward. He stumbled, caught off guard by my sudden aggression. "Sophie, shut up," I commanded. I shoved him backward. He hit the edge of the mattress and fell back onto the bed, looking up at me with stunned, wide eyes. The Alpha King, toppled by a feverish woman. I didn't hesitate. I climbed over him, straddling his waist, settling my weight against his hips. The contact was electric, a spark that turned the fire in my blood into an explosion. I leaned down, bracing my hands on either side of his head, trapping him. "You win," I whispered against his lips, feeling his breath hitch, feeling his hands finally come up to grip my hips. "I surrender," I breathed, brushing my lips against his. "Now take me." Chapter 15. The Claiming. For a heartbeat, Cain didn't move. He lay beneath me, his chest heaving, his hands gripping my hips with enough force to bruise, staring up at me as if he were trying to solve a complex equation. He was looking for the fever. He was looking for the delirium. But all he found was me. "Say it again," he commanded, his voice a wrecked ruin of its former composure. "I want you," I said, leaning down until my lips brushed the pulse hammering frantically in his throat. "I choose you, Cain. No more games. No more negotiations. Just us." The last thread of his restraint snapped with a violence that made me gasp. In a blur of motion, the world flipped. 1 second I was straddling him, and the next my back was pressed into the mattress, and Cain was looming over me, a wall of muscle and heat. He didn't ask for permission this time. He didn't hesitate. He crushed his mouth to mine, devouring me. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a collision. It was 3 days of starving, 3 days of taunts and steam and suppressed rage, all exploding at once. He tasted like wine and wood smoke, wild and overwhelming. I wrapped my legs around his waist, pulling him closer, needing to erase every millimeter of space that had ever existed between us. His hands were everywhere, tangling in my hair, tracing the curve of my spine, learning the map of my body with a desperation that bordered on worship. The fever that had been plaguing me didn't vanish, but it changed. It shifted from a sickness into a roaring fire that only he could stoke. "Mine," he growled against my skin, his teeth grazing the sensitive spot just below my ear. "You are mine, Sophie. There is no going back after this." "I don't want to go back," I panted, arching into his touch. "Claim me, Cain. Finish it." He pulled back, his eyes glowing so bright they illuminated the dark room. He looked terrifying. He looked beautiful. He looked at me not as a king looks at a subject, but as a starving man looks at a feast he can finally touch. "You mark me," he demanded, his voice rough. He tilted his head back, baring his throat, the ultimate sign of submission from an alpha. "You do it first. Show me you accept this." I didn't hesitate. I sat up, wrapping my arms around his shoulders, and buried my face in the crook of his neck. The scent of him was intoxicating, driving my wolf insane. I opened my mouth and sank my teeth into the junction of his shoulder and neck. Cain roared, a sound of pure, primitive possession that shook the walls. I felt the bond snap into place like a steel cable pulling taut. A flood of emotions that weren't mine crashed into my mind. Relief, adoration, overwhelming protectiveness. It was him. I was feeling him. He didn't wait. He flipped me back down and returned the mark, his teeth sinking into the claim spot on my shoulder. The pain was sharp, electric, and instantly replaced by a wave of pleasure so intense I cried out. The no-touching rule was obliterated. The walls I had built for years, the professionalism, the coldness, the fear of being vulnerable, crumbled into dust. There was no negotiator here. There was only Sophie and the mate she had finally let in. Chapter 16. Morning Light. I woke up to the smell of coffee and the blinding glare of sunlight. For a long, disoriented moment, I didn't know where I was. My body felt heavy, aching in a way that was deeply satisfying. My skin felt sensitive, every brush of the high thread count sheets sending a phantom memory of Cain's hands across my nerves. Then the memories flooded back. The fever, the fight, the surrender, the way I had demanded he take me, and the absolute thoroughness with which he had complied. A blush heated my cheeks, but I found myself smiling. I rolled over, reaching across the massive bed, ready to drag the Alpha King back under the covers and demand a round two. My hand hit cold sheets. I frowned, patting the mattress. Cain? I cracked one eye open. The other side of the bed was empty. The pillow was fluffed, as if no one had slept there. I sat up, the sheet pooling at my waist. The room was quiet. Too quiet. Cain? I called out, my voice raspy from sleep and screaming. Silence answered me. Panic, cold and sharp, pricked at the back of my neck. I looked at the window. The steel shutters were gone. The blizzard was over. The sky outside was a piercing, brilliant blue, the sun reflecting off the mountains of fresh snow. The storm had passed. The cage was open. I scrambled out of bed, grabbing Cain's discarded dress shirt from the floor and pulling it on. It smelled like him, which only made the knot in my stomach tighten. Cain! I yelled, walking into the hallway. The penthouse was pristine. The broken door to the guest room had been removed. The shattered wine glass from 2 nights ago was gone. It was as if the chaotic, messy, intimate weekend had never happened. I checked the kitchen. Empty. I checked the living room. Empty. I checked the gym. Empty. He was gone. I stopped at the kitchen island. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. He wouldn't leave, I told myself. We just bonded. He wouldn't just walk away. But my inner critic, the voice that had told me for years that work was the only thing I could rely on, was screaming. He got what he wanted. He proved he could break you. He won the game. Then I saw it. On the granite counter, right where we had argued over peaches, sat a single piece of heavy, cream-colored stationery. It was the official letterhead of the Alpha King. My hands shook as I reached for it. This was it. The goodbye. The explanation. The, "It was fun, but I have a kingdom to run" letter. I picked it up. I turned it over. It was blank. There was nothing written on it. No message, no explanation. Just a blank sheet of paper with the royal crest embossed at the top, mocking me with its silence. I stared at the empty page, my breath hitching in my throat. Why leave a note if you aren't going to say anything? Unless the silence was the message. I gripped the edge of the counter, my knees buckling as the realization hit me. He hadn't just left. He had vanished. And he had left me with absolutely nothing but a mark on my neck and a blank page. Chapter 17. The Reveal. I was going to burn the kingdom down. That was my first thought. I would find a lighter, march down to the archives, and torch the entire Eastern Alliance Treaty before lunch. I stared at the blank page, my fingernails digging into the cardstock until crescent moons appeared in the paper. He had left. He had slept with me, marked me, claimed my soul, and then vanished into the snow like a ghost, leaving me with a piece of stationery that said absolutely nothing. It was the ultimate power move. It was the ultimate rejection. "You coward," I whispered, my voice trembling with a mix of fury and heartbreak that threatened to shatter my ribs. "You manipulative, arrogant, royal—" Scrape. The sound cut through my internal monologue. It was rhythmic, heavy, and coming from outside. Scrape. Pause. Toss. I froze. I dropped the blank note on the counter and turned slowly toward the wall of glass that overlooked the terrace. The shutters were up, but the glass was frosted over with condensation from the temperature difference. I couldn't see out clearly. I walked toward the doors, my bare feet silent on the hardwood. I grabbed the handle of the sliding door and yanked it open. The biting cold hit me instantly, stealing the breath from my lungs. But I didn't feel it. All I felt was the sudden, dizzying rush of relief that nearly knocked me to my knees.
Cain was there. He was wearing gray sweatpants and heavy boots, his torso covered by a thick wool sweater that hugged his shoulders in a way that should be illegal. He was holding a snow shovel. He wasn't leaving. He was digging us out. He had cleared a path from the door to the railing, his breath puffing out in white clouds against the crisp morning air. He stopped mid-scoop when he heard the door open. He turned, leaning on the handle of the shovel, and gave me a crooked, boyish grin that I had never seen on the Alpha King's face before. "Morning, sleepyhead," he said. "I'd offer you coffee, but I realized about 10 minutes ago that I don't know how to work this fancy espresso machine of yours. I'm a French press man." I stood there, shivering in his dress shirt, blinking at him. "You're here." "Where else would I be?" He frowned, his grin fading as he studied my face. He dropped the shovel and walked toward me, kicking the snow off his boots. "Sophie, what's wrong?" "The note," I managed to choke out. "You left a note. It was blank." Cain stopped in front of me, pulling me into the circle of his warmth. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck, looking uncharacteristically sheepish. "Yeah, about that." "Why?" I demanded, hitting his chest lightly with my fist. "Why would you leave a blank piece of paper? Do you know what I thought? I thought you ghosted me." "I tried to write something," he admitted, capturing my hand and pressing a kiss to my knuckles. "I sat there for 20 minutes. I tried good morning, too formal. I tried I love you, too soon. I didn't want to freak you out. I tried last night was life-changing, too cliché." He looked down at me, his golden eyes soft and unguarded. I realized there are no words in the wolf tongue or English that could explain how much I don't want to leave this room. So I panicked, and I went to shovel snow. "I needed to do something with my hands before I woke you up just to make sure you were real." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding, leaning my forehead against his chest. "You are an idiot, Cain." "I'm your idiot," he corrected, wrapping his arms around me. "And while we're clearing the air, there's one more thing." He pulled back, his expression turning serious. "Sienna," he said. I stiffened. "Don't ruin the moment. I need to tell you. Chapter 1, the gala." He held my gaze, refusing to let me look away. "I never touched her, Sophie. I didn't even invite her into the room. She barged in while I was changing. The dress adjustment? She did that herself when she heard the door handle turn. She knew it was you." I stared at him. "She staged it?
We both did, in a way. I saw her doing it. I saw her trying to look guilty, and I let her. He grimaced. I knew it would hurt your pride. I knew it would make you furious, and I banked on the fact that your possessiveness would override your logic. It was a gamble, a cruel one, and I am sorry. I processed this. The anger I expected didn't come. Instead, I felt a grudging respect for the strategy. It was ruthless. It was high stakes. It was exactly the kind of move I would have made. You manipulated me, I said, narrowing my eyes. I woke you up. He countered softly. I'd do it again. I'd burn the whole world down if it meant getting you to look at me the way you're looking at me right now. I smiled, rising on my tiptoes to kiss him. Remind me never to play poker with you. Deal. He kissed me back, slow and deep, sealing the promise. For a moment, everything was perfect. The sun was shining, the treaty was irrelevant, and the king was mine. Then, a sound cut through the silence. Dwup, 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 dwup. A low, rhythmic beating echoed off the canyon walls. The snow on the railing began to vibrate. Cain pulled away, his head snapping toward the horizon. His body instantly shifted from lover back to king.
That's not a rescue team, he growled, his eyes narrowing as a black shape crested the mountain peak, banking sharply toward our terrace. It was a helicopter. But it wasn't the Alliance Rescue Squad. It was painted matte black, with no markings, and the side door was already sliding open, revealing the glint of long-range lenses and a news crew. The press, I whispered, horror washing over me. They found us. Chapter 18. The Public Statement. The helicopter ride was a noisy, vibrating purgatory, but it gave me time to think. Or rather, it gave me time to plot. Cain sat across from me, his knees brushing mine, his hand gripping my thigh with a possessiveness that told the world, and the pilot, exactly who I belonged to. He was back in his Alpha King mask, cold, distant, imperious. But every time his thumb brushed the denim of my jeans, I felt the spark of the man who had shoveled snow just to keep his hands busy. We weren't landing at a private hangar. The press had leaked our location, and the council had panicked. We were landing directly on the front lawn of the Grand Pack House. "You don't have to say anything," Cain shouted over the roar of the rotors as the ground rushed up to meet us. "I'll handle the press. I'll clear the area." I looked out the window. A sea of cameras, council members, and curious wolves surged against the security barriers. And there, standing right at the front, looking like the cat who had swallowed the canary, was Sienna. She was smiling. She thought she had won. She thought the scandal of being trapped for 3 days without a chaperone would ruin my professional reputation. She thought I would emerge flustered, ashamed, and desperate to spin the narrative. I looked back at Cain and smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "No," I said, unbuckling my seatbelt as the skids touched the grass. "I think I'll handle this one." The doors slid open. The noise of the crowd was instantly deafening. Flashbulbs popped like strobe lights, blinding us. "Sophie! Sophie, is the treaty dead?" "King Cain, did you compromise the negotiator?" "Is it true you were trapped for 72 hours?" Cain stepped out first, his presence instantly quieting the immediate circle. He reached a hand back for me. I took it, not for support, but for partnership. I stepped onto the tarmac, chin high, spine straight, wearing Cain's oversized dress shirt tucked into my jeans. I looked like I had just rolled out of his bed. Because I had. We walked the gauntlet. Sienna stepped forward, breaking the line of security. She looked pristine in a white suit, a calculated contrast to my disheveled state.
Sophie, she called out, her voice pitched perfectly to be picked up by the microphones. Oh, you poor thing. It must have been terrifying being trapped in such primitive conditions. I hope you managed to maintain your professionalism. The council is very concerned about the optics of an affair. The crowd went silent. She had dropped the word affair like a grenade. I stopped. Cain stopped with me, his body tensing, ready to rip her apart verbally. I squeezed his hand, signaling him to stand down. My turn. I released Cain's hand and walked up to Sienna. I invaded her personal space, towering over her in spirit, if not in height. "You're worried about optics, Sienna?" I asked, my voice calm and carrying clearly over the hushed crowd. "I'm just worried about your reputation," she feigned sweetness. "It's hard to be a negotiator when everyone knows you've been compromised." "I haven't been compromised," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. "I've been claimed." Sienna's smile faltered. I turned my back on her, dismissing her completely. I faced Cain. He was watching me with that familiar, hungry darkness in his eyes, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. I didn't say another word. I didn't issue a press release. I grabbed the lapels of his leather jacket and yanked him down. I kissed him. It wasn't a polite, diplomatic peck. It was a searing, possessive, soul-deep kiss that left absolutely no room for interpretation. The crowd gasped. The cameras went wild, the shutter sounds merging into a single continuous buzz. I felt Cain smile against my lips as his arms wrapped around my waist, lifting me off the ground, kissing me back with a ferocity that made my knees weak. I pulled back, breathless, and then, with a deliberate, slow movement, I reached up and pulled the collar of his shirt aside. There, stark and undeniable against his tanned skin, was the bite mark. My mark. Fresh, healing, and permanent. The gasp from the crowd was audible. A mating mark on an Alpha King was rare. A mating mark given by a female negotiator was unheard of. I looked at the cameras, then at the stunned council members, and finally at a pale, open-mouthed Sienna. "The treaty is signed," I announced, my voice ringing with finality. "Any other questions?" Cain laughed. He pulled me back into his side, looking out at the stunned audience with the supreme arrogance of a man who had won everything. He looked directly at the camera lens, his golden eyes flashing. "I told you," Cain said, his voice a deep, victorious rumble that silenced the world. "She just hadn't claimed me yet."